Welcome to Dark Whispers. In today's story, we dive into a chilling psychological horror where time slips away, reality bends, and the lines between sanity and madness blur. Our protagonist finds themselves trapped in a seemingly endless waiting room, haunted by memories and the unsettling feeling that something isn't right. As the hours drag on, a dark truth begins to unravel. Is it just paranoia or something far more sinister? Get ready for an unsettling journey into the unknown. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more eerie tales and bone-chilling horror stories.
I'm visiting my family member today, haven't seen them in a while. But I'm here to show that they're not forgotten. The fluorescent lights hummed above the waiting room, casting a sterile, cold glow over the empty waiting area. The room was silent, except for the faint buzz of the lights and the occasional click of a door far down the hallway. It was the kind of quiet that made every sound feel louder, more intrusive, echoing in the stillness. The walls were an off-white, somewhere between beige and the color of old bones, and the chairs were the standard issue, institutional type, hard, uncomfortable, and designed for endurance rather than comfort. I sat in one of those chairs, legs crossed, with my hands resting on my knees, trying to keep still. My eyes flitted to the wall clock across the room, an old analog model with black hands ticking away the seconds, each movement a reminder of how much time had passed. It's 3 o'clock. I had been sitting here since, 2? 3? I couldn't remember anymore. Time had become slippery, like trying to grasp water in my hands. My phone, a once sleek and dependable companion, now lay uselessly in my pocket. The battery had drained to a critical 2% about an hour ago, and I dared not waste the remaining charge. I had no charger with me. I hadn't thought to bring one. Why would I? I didn't expect to be here this long. Yet here I was, the minutes stretching into hours, the hours dragging on into some indeterminate eternity. I thought about asking the receptionist if they had a charger, but the thick glass window she sat behind made the thought feel futile. She seemed so distant, an island behind her partition, engrossed in something on her computer screen. Besides, what would I say? I'm sorry to bother you, but do you have a charger? My phone's almost dead, and I might need it for an emergency. It sounded so petty, so insignificant in the grand scheme of things. Instead, I sat quietly, trying to distract myself by staring at the dull grey tiles on the floor, tracing the patterns of grout with my eyes. It didn't help. My mind wandered, slipping into thoughts about my life, my routines, the little things that filled my days. I lived alone in a small apartment on the 3rd floor of a nondescript building in the city. No wife, no kids, not even a pet to keep me company. Just me, my TV, and my microwave dinners. It wasn't much, but it was my life. A sharp noise broke through my thoughts, a door opening and closing down the hall. I perked up, my heart skipping a beat, but no one appeared. I waited a few more minutes, trying to keep calm, but the restless energy inside me grew. I stood up and walked over to the small window set into the wall next to the receptionist. She didn't notice me at first, despite me being right in front of her, her eyes still fixed on her screen. I cleared his throat, and she finally looked up, blinking as if seeing me for the first time. "Excuse me." I tried to keep my voice steady and polite. "I was wondering, do you know when I hesitated. For a moment, the words seemed to slip away from me. "When my family member will be out. I've been waiting a while." The receptionist looked at me with a practiced smile, the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm sorry for the wait," she said, her voice professional, soothing. "They'll be out soon, just a little longer." I nodded, forcing a smile in return. "Oh, of course, I shouldn't have asked." "Thank you," I stepped back, feeling foolish. What did I expect? They were doing their best. I sat down again, trying to settle my nerves, but something about the whole situation nagged at me. It wasn't like me to be this anxious. I was usually so patient, so understanding. But then, He thought about how long he had been sitting there waiting, and a sense of unease crept in. My thoughts drifted again, this time to memories from my childhood, summer days spent at my grandparents' house, playing in the yard, the smell of fresh-cut grass, the sound of cicadas in the trees. But the images were fuzzy, the details blurred, as if my mind was playing a trick on me. I tried to focus, to hold on to the memories, but they kept slipping away, replaced by fragments of other memories. My first job at the grocery store, the smell of stale bread in the back room, the soft hum of the refrigerators. Everything seemed to jumble together, a patchwork of moments that didn't quite fit. I shook my head, trying to clear it. This wasn't like me at all. I wasn't one to get lost in my thoughts like this. I glanced at the clock again. 5:13 p.m. More time had passed than he realized. My stomach grumbled, reminding me that I hadn't eaten since breakfast. I should be home by now, microwaving a TV dinner, maybe watching some old reruns on TV. But instead, I was still here, in this waiting room with no end in sight. I stood up again, pacing the length of the room, my anxiety growing with each step. I thought about asking the receptionist for an update, but hesitated. What was the point? They'd just tell him the same thing. Soon. Just a little longer. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that something was wrong. The memories that had been so clear earlier now felt distant, disjointed. I couldn't remember the last time I'd actually spoken to my family member. Had it been days? Weeks? The thought sent a chill down my spine. Why was I here? Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I marched back to the window and knocked, louder this time. The receptionist looked up, her smile fading slightly as she saw the look on his face. "Is something wrong?" she asked, her voice still calm, but there was a hint of concern now. I swallowed, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm sorry to bother you again, but is there any update? I've been waiting for hours and I just want to know if everything's okay." The receptionist glanced at the clock on her desk, then back at me. "I understand, sir. It shouldn't be much longer now. Maybe 30 minutes. We're very sorry for the delay." 30 minutes, I repeated, nodding slowly. "Okay, that's good. I can wait a little longer." I forced another smile, but it felt wrong on his face, like my muscles were moving on their own. I stepped back from the window and resumed pacing, my thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and doubt. 30 minutes came and went. The clock ticked past 6 p.m., and my anxiety turned into something darker, more insistent. I felt the walls closing in, the air growing thicker, harder to breathe. My thoughts spiraled, the memories that had once been comforting now twisted, distorted. He thought about the dinner he should be having right now, the warmth of his apartment, the familiar routine that grounded him. But the more he tried to hold on to those thoughts, the more they slipped away, replaced by a growing sense of dread. I couldn't take it anymore. My hands shook as I walked back to the window, my heart pounding in my chest. I knocked again, harder this time, my knuckles turning white from the force. "I need to see my family member," I demanded, my voice louder than I intended. "I've been waiting too long. This isn't right." The receptionist didn't respond immediately. She turned away from the window, speaking to someone behind the frosted glass. I strained to hear, pressing his ear to the cool surface, but the words were muffled, indistinct. I caught fragments, getting agitated again. Code orange, not again. But they didn't make sense. A sick feeling settled in my stomach. They were talking about me. I stepped back, panic rising in his chest. This wasn't just a delay. Something was wrong. I reached into his pocket for his phone, desperate to call someone, anyone, but my fingers didn't find the familiar shape of his phone. Instead, they closed around something soft, something that shouldn't be there. My breath caught in my throat as I pulled it out. A foam block, the kind they used in arts and crafts, shaped like a phone but obviously not real. I stared at it in disbelief, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. This wasn't my phone. This wasn't real. My gaze dropped to my clothes, and for the first time I noticed what he was wearing. Not his usual jeans and t-shirt, but loose white pants and a matching shirt, the kind of clothing patients wore. My breath quickened, the room spinning around me. This wasn't right. This wasn't happening. The door at the end of the hall opened again, and this time someone stepped out. A man in his late 40s with a kind face and a cup of water in one hand, a small paper cup of pills in the other. The man smiled gently, the way you might smile at a frightened child. "It's time for your meds," the man said softly, his voice soothing, as if trying to calm him down. I shook my head, backing away, my mind racing. No, this isn't right. I'm not supposed to be here. I'm just waiting for my... The words caught in my throat, the truth finally hitting him with the force of a sledgehammer. I'm just waiting. The man with the meds stepped closer, his movements slow and deliberate, as if approaching a skittish animal. "It's okay," he said in that same soothing tone. "Everything's going to be okay. Just take your meds and we'll get you back to your room. You'll feel better soon." He wanted to run, to scream, to do anything but stand there, but his feet were rooted to the spot. His mind was a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and denial. How could this be happening? How could he have forgotten something so fundamental? "I'm not supposed to be here," he mumbled, his voice shaky, barely above a whisper. I was just waiting. The man with the meds smiled, but it was a sad, almost pitying smile. "I know it's confusing," he said, his voice calm, like a parent explaining something to a child. "But this is where you're supposed to be. You've had a hard time." Before he could finish, something snapped inside the patient. A flash of anger, of fear surged through him, overriding the fog of confusion that had clouded his mind. He slapped the cup out of the man's hand, sending the pills flying across the floor. The man barely had time to react before the patient's fist collided with his chest, the force of the blow staggering him backward. "Get away from me!" I shouted, my voice raw with panic. "I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not crazy." I stumbled, clutching my chest, but before I could respond, 2 more orderlies emerged from the hallway, their footsteps quick and purposeful. Their faces were grim, expressions hardened by routine, as if they'd done this 100 times before. "No, no, no!" I cried out as the orderlies closed in on me, their hands grabbing my arms with practiced efficiency. I thrashed against their grip, but they were strong. Far stronger than I was in my weakened state. The panic in my chest grew, blossoming into full-blown terror as I realized I couldn't escape. "Hold him still," one of the orderlies ordered, his voice cool and authoritative. The other nodded, tightening his grip on the patient's arms, pinning them to his sides. The patient fought, my mind a swirling storm of fear and confusion, but it was no use. I was no match for the 2 men. I felt a sharp sting in his neck, something cold and metallic, and he realized with dawning horror that one of the orderlies had injected him with something. "No, please," I mumbled, my strength ebbing away as quickly as it had come. The room around him started to blur, the faces of the orderlies and the man with the meds blending into a haze. The fight drained out of him, my limbs growing heavy, useless. The orderlies eased him back down into the chair, their movements efficient, almost mechanical. I sagged into the seat, my body going limp as the drug worked its way through my system. The world around me began to fade, the edges of my vision growing dark, fuzzy. One of the orderlies knelt in front of me, speaking softly, but the words were distant, unintelligible. My mind was slipping again, sinking back into that familiar fog. I tried to cling to something, anything, but there was nothing left to hold on to. Nothing but the empty waiting room and the ticking of the clock. The orderly's voice faded entirely, replaced by the rhythmic sound of the clock ticking away the minutes. I blinked slowly, my eyes heavy, and when I opened them again, the orderlies were gone. The room was empty once more, silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights. I looked down at his hands, feeling an overwhelming sense of déjà vu. Where had I been? What had just happened? It was all so confusing, my thoughts jumbled and disjointed. I couldn't remember why I was here, couldn't remember how long I had been waiting. My mind wandered, circling back to the familiar thoughts, the familiar worries. How long had it been? I glanced at the clock on the wall, but the numbers swam before his eyes, refusing to come into focus. It's 3 o'clock.
And in the end, as the fog of confusion swallowed reality, one question remained. Was I waiting for them, or had I been the one left behind all along? Sometimes the truth we seek lies not in the answers we receive, but in the moments we've lost along the way. Let me know if you want any changes or a different tone.